But I decided based on that conversation, instead of using various different compounds, why don't I ramp up the dose of testosterone over time and see where I feel best? And that sweet spot of 8 ampules of Bayer testosterone per week is certainly where it's at. I literally felt like a god. Vigorous Steve here. I got another story for you guys. Let's talk about that time I ran 2,000 milligrams of testosterone enanthate per week and somehow didn't die. If he dies, he dies, right? Well, at that time, that didn't apply to me. I'm still around kicking and chewing bubblegum here and there. This cycle had a couple different iterations. I would usually ramp up the dose of testosterone enanthate starting with 250 milligrams and ending up somewhere between 1,500 milligrams up to 2,000 milligrams, which is the cycle we're going to discuss in this video. That's from 2018. And when I say 2,000 milligrams, guys, running Bayer testosterone or Rotex Medica testosterone, those ampules are overfilled. So actually, when you do the calculations, you get between 1.1 to 1.3 milliliters per one single ampule. And even though the concentration is still 250 milligrams per 1 milliliter, if you're getting more milliliters out of a single ampule, that means my actual cycle might have been 2,500 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. And at other times, when I was running high-dose test cycles, let's say 1 ampule of testosterone per day, 1 amp of test per day keeps the doctor at bay, if only, right? 1,750 milligrams weekly, but in reality, that's almost 2,200 milligrams weekly if you go by the actual content of a single ampule of Bayer or Rotex Medica testosterone being overfilled. And when I was running 1,500 milligrams, in reality, I was running close to 1,900 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week. So if my dosing parameters are slightly off and the blood work results represent that, or the results that you'll see on screen from the progress pictures which I took around the time that I took my blood work results as well, then you know exactly why. Again, pharmaceutical grade testosterones are generally overfilled, so you get exactly what you pay for. If you think it's highly expensive, well, that's because you get more. Instead of 4 milliliters, you probably get 5 milliliters out of it, which is probably 2/3 of a vial of underground lab testosterone enanthate, which is probably also underdosed. But before we get into it, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you want to join the weekly Vigorous Q&A, which is always on Saturday, we have a private Q&A for about an hour, hour and a half. If you want to join that one before the general population tries to get their questions in, you can join the YouTube or Patreon memberships with a 100% chance that you can get your questions answered. And otherwise, you can vote for upcoming deep dives and decide which deep dive I'm going to produce next, which is now going to be released over several parts because they're so deep that it requires hours just to get the content out. Okay, let's get started with this 2,000 milligrams, or let's say 2,500 milligram testosterone cycle that I did in 2018. Again, I was ramping up the dosages nice and slow. I started with 250 milligrams per week to get the most results out of it. As I was bulking to gain a little bit of size, I think I ended up around 110, 115 kilograms, nice and fluffy, so no pictures there. And then I think I ended up around 1,000 milligrams of testosterone enanthate per week when I finished my off season. And then as the calories came down, the dosage of testosterone came up with a couple different increments. So I was ending my off season with 4 ampules of Bayer testosterone per week. So let's say that's actually 1,250 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, but over 4 injections, 1 amp Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then what I did at the next increment, added in another ampule on Saturday. So I had 5 ampules per week. And then the next increment was 6 ampules per week. And then I went straight to 2,000 milligrams, close to the time I was starting to prepare for this photo shoot. This is when I did blood work, the blood work parameters, the blood work results that we're going to discuss shortly. Now, what else was I running at the time for full transparency? Actually, I kept it very simple. I was running the cookie cutter supplementation stack, citrus bergamot to keep my lipids in range. I didn't know about ezetimibe at all. That wasn't really a thing. I didn't use a statin. I didn't use anything else. I used citrus bergamot, 1,000 milligrams per day, 500 milligrams berberine per day. I was on a ketogenic diet with healthy fats only and fish oil with every meal. I was doing 2 workouts per day, morning and evening. I was doing cardio once per day and posing practice once per day. So I was very physically active. I took, I think, 6,000 milligrams astragalus root extract to help with kidney function. I didn't take any creatine monohydrate at the time. I think my supplementation was very, very simple. And the only thing that I used to keep my blood pressure in range was 10 milligrams Cialis every single day pre-workout, the first workout of the day, because again, it has a long active life, so you don't need to dose that twice. The pumps that you get in the evening from a morning dose of Cialis are still there, and my blood pressure stayed in range quite well. I think I was up to 5 milligrams Cialis when I was running 4 ampules or 5 ampules of testosterone per week. And then when I increased it to 5 or 6 ampules, I think I had a little bit of an issue with my blood pressure, so I increased it to 10 milligrams Cialis. And the main reason is because I always got weird side effects, like a little bit of a dry cough from lisinopril, and telmisartan, again, wasn't a thing. Nobody talked about telmisartan. That's only been around, or at least been advocated, for the last 3 or 4 years. And we're talking about a cycle that I did 5 years ago. So at the time, the knowledge wasn't as super physiological as it is now. And of course, over time, practices and recommendations and ancillaries certainly changed. Now, I will say that this was probably the best cycle I've ever done. And I got this idea from Aaron Reed, one of the tallest bodybuilders on the planet. He's worked very closely with Ryan Reynolds on various movies. The latest one, I believe, was Free Guy, where he plays dude. So you have guy against dude, and dude basically has the face of Ryan Reynolds, but that body was from Aaron Reed, one of the tallest bodybuilders and the most jacked guys I've ever met in my life. When he was in Thailand in, I think, 2017 or maybe early 2018, we had an off-camera conversation about particular practices. I'll leave that conversation between Aaron and myself. Right? He's famous now, so we're not going to go into details. But I decided, based on that conversation, instead of using various different compounds, why don't I ramp up the dose of testosterone over time and see where I feel best? And that sweet spot of 8 ampules Bayer testosterone per week is certainly where it's at. I literally felt like a god. Really. And of course, on Trenbolone acetate, you feel like a god too, but you have this perpetual rain cloud above your head, and you're always annoyed and irritated and maybe a little bit jealous, or you have sexual deviancy and all kinds of side effects that you think you can tolerate, but actually in reality, you really can't, because you're literally a total dickhead. So the Trenbolone sandwich was long out of my system by the time, on my wife's request, but a hefty dose between 2,000 to 2,500 milligrams testosterone enanthate per week, I had no side effects. Really, my blood work parameters, as you'll see after this, are actually quite good at just running this protocol of tests, aromacin, growth hormone, and a couple ancillaries in the form of over-the-counter supplements, albeit that Cialis isn't exactly over-the-counter, unless you live in Thailand, where you can literally buy Cialis over-the-counter, no prescription required. So it was a very simple cycle, and the results speak for themselves. I felt great. I was highly energetic. I didn't need to use copious amounts of fat burners. If anything, I took maybe a little bit of clenbuterol at certain periods. But, you know, when you train twice per day and you do daily fasted cardio and posing practice, because you want to hit your shots properly when you do your photo shoot, then it wasn't really required. I didn't take injectable carnitine, wasn't available to me. I probably took oral L-carnitine, L-tartrate with every single meal, right? Maybe at 3,000 milligrams in total. So, you know, due to availability and knowledge 5 years ago, the cycle was a lot simpler, and still, to this day, one of the best cycles I've ever done. I was happy-go-lucky, easy to be around, easy to talk to, always approachable, while I was dieting my socks off, doing that much cardio and that much workouts and that much posing practice every single day of the week. Well, I took Sunday off, but I was literally doing 2 days, 6 days a week. I felt like I was unbreakable. And honestly, guys, everything that I learned during these high-dose test cycles, experimenting with various dosages of testosterone and growth hormone and insulin and IGF-1, and figuring out the optimal dose of aromacin to keep serum estradiol levels favorable for overall anabolism, but not get too into this territory where you get gyno or water retention or terrible acne, right? I learned everything during this time of experimenting with bioidentical hormones. This is one of the cycles where I learned a lot, and with consecutive cycles, I kind of formulated a plan which resulted in those ebooks, right? You can find them on my website, and I'll link them down below in case you're interested. And otherwise, don't take it from me, just take it from Chase Irons, and probably a good idea to get him on a podcast reasonably soon, just to talk about his protocol and his experience running such a high dose of testosterone, pharmaceutical grade growth hormone alongside of it, because he's literally mutating in front of our eyes.
Yeah, so my current cycle is 3,000 testosterone enanthate, 1,000 masteron enanthate, and 18 IUs of Serostim every single day, dosed one time at night. The reason that I'm taking my testosterone levels up so high is to take maximum advantage of the 18 IUs of pharmacy growth hormone that I'm taking. I've been on 3,000 milligrams of test for the last 3 weeks now, and I've titrated up to this dose. I've been over 2,000 milligrams of test for about the past 2 months. So I moved from 2,000 tests to 2,500 tests to 3,000. I've noticed that the more tests that I use, the greater my pumps are, the greater my fullness is, the more thick that I'm looking. I've also noticed that my insulin sensitivity has improved greatly to the point where if I eat a meal that has 200 grams of carbs in it and extremely low fat, an hour later my blood sugar is going to be 85, and that's even on 18 IUs of growth hormone a day. The reason that I have Masteron in there at 1,000 milligrams a week is to help control estrogen just a little bit. The last time that I got blood work, I was on 2,000 tests, 800 Masteron, and my estrogen was 65. I'll be getting blood work on 3 grams of test and 1 gram of Mast here pretty soon to see where my estrogen levels are and my total testosterone and all of that is. So far, progress has been excellent. I'm currently weighing about 269, 271. This is the heaviest that I have ever been at this body fat percentage. When I started this cycle back in February, I was weighing about 240 pounds and my body fat percentage was definitely much higher than it is right now. So yeah, that's the current cycle. I feel great. I'm gonna keep monitoring my blood work. I'm gonna continue to monitor my blood pressure. So far, everything's sitting A-okay, but if things do change, I will back off the dose.
I'm getting a little bit jealous, Chase. You motherfucker. When my wife is pregnant, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Stay tuned.